Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast. Today on the show, we're starting the Timberwolves Big Board, the top three players on my Timberwolves Big Board, who I would select if the Wolves were drafting first, second, or third in this draft. We're going to start this series here today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Thursday, everybody, and a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find Locked On Wolves. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken, with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right. Today on the show, we're going to start the Locked On Wolves Big Board. So this is from the scope of, from the perspective of the Timberwolves. So not just an overall big board, not just who I think the best prospects in order are necessarily, although I'll give some of that commentary along the way of, if I were this team, I would take this player, or, if maybe there's a situation where if two players are equal in my mind, obviously we're going to go with the fit in terms of the Timberwolves, because that's the exercise here. So, which is interesting because the top three players, pretty much consensus top three in some order, are all basically bigs. Now they're different and they can do different things, as we'll talk about today. So of those three, who would I take and in what order? If I were the Wolves at one, the Wolves were at two, the Wolves were at three. And in my mind, it's pretty clearly three tiers essentially for the Wolves. I think that there's kind of a gap in between each of those three, but I still would go with one of those three guys if I had the top three picks, because I just think that the upside for all three of them is so great. So we'll start with my number one. We're going to do this series over the next couple of weeks leading into the draft, and as we move forward, there's some guys I'll spend less time on than others. I think it's important to spend a little more time on the top three, as you're overall preparing for this draft, preparing to watch this draft, be familiar with the prospects. So I want to spend a little more time here. We may go a little bit more quickly through guys that I think are not a fit, that are going to fall somewhere between the top of the draft and the Wolves pick at 19. But we'll spend more time on players that would be a fantastic fit for the Wolves and potentially could be trade up targets. So this won't necessarily be like a clean three players every show type thing. And obviously, if there's additional news, we'll break from this series to look at, breaking Timberwolves news or whatever that might be over the next few weeks. So let's start today with number one on my Wolves big board. Number one for me, pretty clearly, is Jabari Smith Jr. of Auburn. I just think he's the best. Again, I don't know that I would say he's head and shoulders the best prospect, but I think he is. Plus, I think the fit is far better for him with Minnesota than it would be for either Chet Holmgren or Paolo Banchero. So Jabari Smith Jr. easily is my pick if the Timberwolves had the number one selection in this draft, and he would be such a perfect fit for Minnesota. He is essentially a four in today's NBA with the ability to play small ball five and guard multiple positions. Essentially be switchable on the perimeter, guard threes and even down to twos, because he's so versatile, versatile, yes, but also quick laterally. Offensively, we'll start there. He's a fantastic shooter, just a fantastic shooter, regardless of where he is on the floor. Catch and shoot from three, pull up from three, one dribble in the mid range, pull up jumper in the mid range, off the dribble. From the post, he can hit turnaround jumpers that are very almost Kobe-esque, dare I say. Obviously a lot bigger than Kobe, but that's sort of a turnaround type game. I guess maybe Kevin Durant's a better comp in terms of his size and length. But he's just a fantastic shooter. And what do the Wolves need between Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns? I mean, Ant's a good shooter and Cat's a fantastic shooter. You need another plus shooter, right? Jaden McDaniels has held his own at times. Jared Vanderbilt's not a shooter. Patrick Beverley's a catch and shoot guy only, really. D'Angelo Russell is a good shooter, but he's more of a volume range shooter than he is somebody who's like a legitimate threat from anywhere on the floor to just shoot. And Jabari Smith Jr. He can do all of those things. Again, pull up off the dribble, pick and pop, turnarounds, no matter what it is. He's not the greatest playmaker, but he doesn't need to be. Auburn still ran a bunch of their offense through him, obviously. But he could play at the elbows, he could play in the mid post. You could do a lot of the stuff you do with Karl-Anthony Towns with Jabari Smith because of his touch. He doesn't score a ton in the post, but because he's a good enough passer and has such good touch on, say, a turnaround jumper, he's good on the offensive glass. You could play him wherever you want in the post. It's not like the Wolves play Cat in the low post very often anyway. So you could put Jabari Smith at the elbows. You could put him in the mid post, the kind of the free throw line extended, like the Wolves have done with Cat quite a bit. You could play 5 out with him. I think in my mind, he's a perfect fit offensively. The only thing is obviously he's used to being a high usage guy. He clearly was at Auburn, and he would come to, and this is again, I mean, the Wolves don't have the number 1 pick for a reason, obviously, because they had a good team last year, and Ant and Cat are both fantastic offensively, but he would immediately be the number 3 option, whereas he was the number 1 option in college. And frankly, no matter where he goes at the top of this draft, he's pretty much going to immediately be the number 1 option. I mean, I guess if you go to Oklahoma City and they've got SGA, but I mean, he's going to be the number 1 option wherever he goes pretty quickly in the NBA. And so that would obviously be an adjustment as any of these 3 guys that I'm talking about. We're talking about a team with 2 established stars. What are they going to do? If they add somebody that's top 3 pick in the draft, obviously those players immediately are going to want to be very involved in the offense. In terms of defense, I mean, Jabari Smith is a really good defender too. He's very long, he's active, he's mobile, and perhaps most impressive. And I don't know that you can necessarily say this about the other 2 guys we're going to talk about today, but he doesn't commit fouls. He's very good with his body control. You watch the way that he would contest even on drives. So I'll talk about that portion first. He stays in front of guys and defends with his chest, but in a good way, in that he keeps his torso back, is able to contest shots with his length, and doesn't foul with his body, understands how to control himself, will still contest shots. I mean, he's not a fantastic shot blocker, but the more important thing is he's long and active, and he doesn't foul, can still contest shots. Then on the perimeter, he's legitimately switchable. I mentioned this earlier. He can guard 4s and 3s with ease, can switch on to guards. Frankly, all the way around, both ends of the floor, I would consider him a dream fit. If the Wolves magically had the number 1 pick, this is a no-brainer. It's Jabari Smith. Just a fantastic fit for Minnesota on both ends of the floor. The only real concerns with him, besides the usage thing, in terms of weaknesses overall in his game, is he doesn't really drive to score. He's a catch and shoot guy offensively. And his rebounding ability is fine. It's not fantastic. It's just fine. But that's okay, because he'd be playing next to Karl-Anthony Towns. You'd probably play him at stretches with Jaden McDaniels at the 3, so it'd be length on the floor. And he could play some small ball 5, but again, not a fantastic rebounder. He doesn't play make. The Wolves wouldn't need him to play make, and that's why he's easily number 1. He's a catch and shoot guy, can score from anywhere on the floor, can catch and shoot from anywhere on the floor, can play make out of the post. When I say he doesn't play make, I mean with the ball in his hands. He's not going to operate pick and roll. He's not going to initiate from the perimeter, but they don't need him to. Cat can do that when he needs to. Ant is great at doing that. Plus, you've still got D'Angelo Russell on the roster, or Patrick Beverly, whoever else you want to initiate offense. Jabari Smith would be a catch and shoot guy. He'd be your 3rd option. And again, could score anywhere on the floor and be fantastic defensively. I said this a minute ago, an absolute dream, perfect fit for Minnesota if the Wolves magically had the number 1 pick. I don't think there's any question about it. Okay, I have a clear number 2 as well. And I think this is pretty obvious. And then I think 3 is another step back for me in terms of fit with Minnesota, what I would do if I were drafting at the top of the draft in charge of the Wolves. First, let's talk about our friends over at Rock Auto. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com, both at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why would you spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? Plus, Rock Auto is a family business and has been serving do-it-yourselfers now for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could possibly need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, to even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Thanks once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Now, I have an important favor to ask of you, the listener. We put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like yourself and make your favorite Locked On podcasts even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and what you don't like about Locked On podcasts. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It doesn't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey will qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thank you in advance for your help. All right. Number 2 on my Wolves big board after Jabari Smith, I think this is also a clear one for me, is Chet Holmgren. And no, he's not a perfect fit with Minnesota. I just think he's a much better I shouldn't say much better. I think he's a better prospect than the player we'll talk about next, which is who is Paolo Banchero, excuse me. I just think Holmgren's a better prospect, and I also think he would fit what the Wolves need better because of his two main strengths, their shot blocking and rebounding, and then his third strength, which would be as a stretch shooter. We'll get to Banchero here in a minute, but those are all things that are not strengths of his. And even though Chet Holmgren's 7'1" and is a center, and Karl-Anthony Towns is 6'11" and is a center, I think you could play them together if you had the number 2 pick and the value is there. I think you got to take it because let's talk about him as a prospect first, and then I'll explain why I think it would make sense if you were the Wolves at number 2. Number 1, he's an elite shot blocker. He is one of the best shot blockers in recent memory in college basketball and would immediately be a plus shot blocker at the NBA level. Provided, and we'll talk about this too, he can stay somewhat out of foul trouble. The length is unbelievable. Just unbelievable. 7'6" wingspan. And it allows him to block shots from really anywhere. And he's also got a motor defensively, so he can get chase down blocks in the open floor, even if he's several strides behind. He can, help down from the perimeter and get blocks in the paint. He can contest closeouts for him. He doesn't need to foul on a closeout. His arms are so long. He can reach up and over many players' jump shots, frankly, and can contest on closeouts better than really anybody. On the perimeter, he's ultra switchable. He's actually quick enough. A lot of times, I mean, you don't find very many 7-footers or in this over 7'1" guys that actually have the range and lateral quickness to be able to switch on the perimeter. And I truly think he's going to be an adequate pick and roll defender at the NBA level. I think he can switch and still help and recover, regardless of what scheme he's in. I think he can do all of those things because of really impressive quickness, good athleticism, outstanding length, a good basketball IQ, understands. I mean, if he is helping on a pick and roll and they're kind of in a sense hedging and trying to contain the pick and roll ball handler, he can recover and contest the roller's shot. And there's multiple examples of that last year, Gonzaga, where he was recovering and blocking the shot of the roller at the rim after helping to contain the ball handler. It's that sort of recovery speed, the effort, the want to, and then obviously the unteachable length that and shot blocking ability overall is so good. It's just completely elite. There's no question about it. And what are the Wolves lacking? Well, not just one thing, but perhaps arguably the biggest thing that they're lacking is that paint presence, that shot blocking ability. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns is much improved defensively, but he's not a rim protector in really any sense of the word. And Jared Vanderbilt is an okay shot blocker, but he's undersized and he's being asked to do a lot of other things defensively in most cases too, isn't always near the rim. Jaden McDaniels can block shots, but same idea. He's often on the perimeter. We're talking recovery blocks if he's trailing somebody, trailing a ball handler, getting downhill, or chase down blocks in the open floor. Those things can come for Vanderbilt and McDaniels, but they're not traditional shot blockers, and neither is Karl-Anthony Towns. So the fit with Minnesota is simply they don't have a shot blocker. Chet is that. Also, in terms of rebounding, his rebound percentage at Gonzaga was it was over 19%, I believe. His total, 19.2 was his rebound percentage. That would immediately place him in the top 10 in the NBA. He would have been like ninth in the NBA in terms of rebound percentage this year. Obviously, that number, well, I shouldn't say obviously. I doubt it'll stay that high as a rookie in the NBA. However, that shows instinct. It shows competitiveness. He does have a willingness to box out, and I don't know how effective that'll be at the NBA level because of how slender his build is. But the fact that he fundamentally can box out, and will box out and has the length to grab one-handed rebounds, kind of snatch rebounds out of the air, to go up and compete, the willingness to compete on the glass. another thing the Wolves lack, right? They don't have very many guys that are ultra aggressive on the glass. Towns is at times, and he's a good rebounder, not a great rebounder. We saw those numbers dip this year too because he spent more time on the perimeter. Jared Vanderbilt's a very good rebounder, a plus rebounder, but he's, again, undersized, and he's only one guy. Oftentimes is switched onto the perimeter as well, and does a lot of his damage on the offensive glass as well. But Vando is really the only clear plus rebounder on the Wolves. McDaniels struggled in that regard, and none of the other bigs are really outstanding on the glass either, or anywhere close to outstanding. So Chet's shot blocking ability and ability on the glass would be massive for the Timberwolves. The concerns with him, of course, are his frame. He's slender. He's got a slight build. Can he compete? Can he bang in the post with the Joel Embiids and Nikola Jokic's and the Karl-Anthony Towns of the world who want to back you down in the paint? There are some teams that will matter against, right? Not every team has calls for low post up opportunities as part of their offense, but teams will also seek it out, right? Almost every team has somebody that can score in the post or at least play bully ball in the post. Now, I guess if you're not a skilled post player, are you going to be able to score around Chet Holmgren's length? Probably not. He competed defensively in the post in college, so the best post players shouldn't have any problem. I shouldn't say that. The best post players should be able to dominate him in the post, and that's a concern. The Embiids, the Jokic's, etc. But average post players to not great post players that are trying to force it because they think they can play bully ball are probably going to get their shot blocked because he can hold his own in the post. My biggest concern with him would be foul trouble. I think for the most part, he can get to shots and not foul because of his length. And he showed that for the most part at Gonzaga. Obviously, late in their season, there were some issues with foul trouble, some notable and well-publicized issues that, officiating was part of it too. But I think he's going to struggle to learn how to defend without fouling at the NBA level. And from a Wolves perspective, if they draft him and he starts with Karl-Anthony Towns, you're going to have two guys that are very foul prone next to each other. If you're not going to draft somebody number 2 overall and play him off the bench, you'd have to play him and Towns together if you're the Wolves. Again, if they're magically at number 2 in the draft, but those are really my only main concerns. He doesn't really play make much, which is fine. Again, for the Wolves, they don't need that out of their first round pick because they have Ant, they have Cat. Those guys should be playmaking 85% of the time for Minnesota. I think Chet Holmgren would be a complementary fit offensively, catch and shoot guy. There's not much in between to his game, but he can shoot from anywhere on the floor, and the touch is obviously very good. Doesn't need to put the ball on the floor and score much, although he can. He doesn't need to initiate offense much. He's a good cutter, by the way, so if he's playing off the ball, which he would, because the offense would run through Cat in the mid or high post, or at the elbows, or through Anthony Edwards on the perimeter, and Chet Holmgren can stretch the floor, be a threat to draw defense out to the perimeter, but also is a good cutter with his length. Should be effective doing that at the NBA level as well. He's obviously not a perfect fit. Bottom line, not a perfect fit because of Karl-Anthony Towns. They play the same position. But in my mind, he's easily the second best prospect in this draft after Smith. And I think because of his immediate value as a stretch big, as a rebounder, and as a shot blocker and strong switchable perimeter defender with chops in the pick and roll, the ability to block shots at the rim, I think you'd have to take him second if you're the Wolves and just figure it out. And obviously, there'd be a conversation down the road of trading either Chet Holmgren or Karl-Anthony Towns, depending on how things shake out. But they could play together. And if you're second in this draft magically, I think you'd have to take Chet Holmgren. Again, Jabari Smith for me is head and shoulders number 1 as a fit for the Wolves. I like him best as a prospect overall. This was an overall big board. I'd put Smith 1 and Chet 2 anyway. But the fit with the Wolves is what makes this very clear to me. I think it makes it less close putting Smith at 1 and Holmgren at 2. All right, we'll close the show by talking about Paolo Banchero, the big from Duke. We're going to do that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Don't you love a chewy, chocolatey brownie? What about a caramel brownie with caramel swirled on top? Delicious. What if I told you can have all that chewy, chocolatey deliciousness plus 17 grams of protein? You're in luck because caramel brownie bars are available at Built.com right now, and you got to act fast because they're absolutely a fan favorite. Forget about dessert. These are better than dessert. Plus, the macros are unreal. Just 130 calories, plus 17 grams of protein and just 4 grams of sugar. I would absolutely replace a regular brownie with Built's caramel brownie bar in a heartbeat. And the best part is that they're covered in 100% real chocolate. With Built, you don't have to sacrifice tasty for healthy. You can have both. Plus, all Built's bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. There are a million reasons you should try Built bars, but for now, let's just say that caramel brownie will definitely rock your world, and that's not an understatement. With Built, Tasty is the new healthy. Go to built.com and get your box of caramel brownie bars now. Built.com and use our promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, let's close today's show by talking about Paolo Banchero, the 6'10 big out of Duke. He's 6'10 with a 7-foot wingspan. You could argue he's got the most versatile, the combination of the most versatile and complete offensive game of any player in this draft. That's an argument you could make. I mean, I would argue, I like Jabari Smith's offensive game better. I think it fits the Wolves more. But Banchero can do basically everything. He's got the entire offensive package is probably the best way to put it. He can get into the paint and score. He's obviously got length. He's got very good size and strength. He can shoot pull-up jumpers. He's a strong catch and shoot player. He can score out of the post, whether that's turnaround jumpers, spinning in the post. He loves spin moves both on the perimeter and in the post to get into the paint. And also he can create for others and play make. So it's not just for himself. He's dangerous with the ball in his hands, period, because he can shoot pull-up jumpers and catch and shoot. We'll talk about that in a minute. He's not great there, but he can do it. And the form is good enough. The size is there. He can score off the bounce. He can create for others. Again, it's well-rounded, and he's basically above average in most areas offensively. And I think that's what makes him so intriguing as a prospect is if you're a team that's looking for the guy, he has the ability to become the guy. So like if you're Orlando at number 1, I understand why he would be an attractive fit because he can do more offensively right now than Smith or Chet Holmgren. Is he as polished? No, but he could be a fit there. He maybe makes less sense if you're the Thunder. If I'm the Thunder and I'm sitting at 2, I'm taking whichever one of Chet Holmgren and Jabari Smith doesn't go 1, because I think Paolo Banchero is going to be a high usage guy immediately. And you're the Thunder, you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Obviously, I just don't know that I'd take him 2. But if you're the Rockets at 3 and Banchero's on the board, he makes a lot of sense. I don't think he gets past 3. So I think he goes 1 or 3 in this draft. And for me, he's the third best prospect. And I think easily for me, he's the third best fit for Minnesota when you're looking at the top of the draft board. So I would take him third. I mentioned he's good at basically everything offensively. He has physicality, finishes through contact. He doesn't avoid contact. He almost kind of seeks it out, can get to the free throw line with regularity because of that. And I think that that's obviously a really attractive thing when you're looking at a prospect. And shot selection isn't ideal sometimes because he doesn't have a problem with driving into contact or shooting a tough jumper. But it's positive that he's able to do all these different things. He's very good in the open floor. He's a good enough athlete to score from anywhere. He's very good in transition. The issues are really mostly about the jumper. And before we get to defense, the offensive issues, he was 32% overall from 3 thereabouts, maybe a little better than that, I guess. Catch and shoot, though, he was about 36%. So there's obviously some upside. And I talked about his shot in terms of mechanics looks fine. He can get it off from anywhere because of his size and his overall scoring ability. 32% for 3 is not great. 36% catch and shoot shows some ability, shows some upside there. And again, he's young. He is about to turn 20 or he's really only 19 and a half right now. So there's certainly additional offensive upside. And if the jumper continues to improve, you're talking about arguably the best offensive prospect in this draft. But again, if I'm the Wolves, the fit of an immediate plus upside with the shooting of Jabari Smith or even the shooting of Chet Holmgren is better than Banchero's sitting here right now. The overall concerns in terms of his prospect profile for Banchero is defensively. He's not super switchable. He can get beat pretty easily by quick guards. He's okay against guys, that are similar size, or if there's a bigger player handling on the perimeter, he can get away with, or I should say he's able to stay in front of people and can get away with trailing, guys because of his length. He's able to block some shot. He's not a great shot blocker, but because he's got the size, the 7-foot wingspan, he can compete defensively. But that's the problem is he doesn't always compete defensively. Now, this is one of my concerns. If you go back in time 2 years and listen to my pre-draft podcast when I was talking about Anthony Edwards as a prospect, he landed number 2 on my Timberwolves big board. Ant did, mostly because I was worried about his defensive want to, his ability to always compete defensively. Banchero has the same issue. So with Ant, I think a lot of it was he got bored. You saw that offensively with his shot selection at Georgia. He was just too good for the college level and legit got bored. I don't know that you can necessarily say that about Banchero. The bigger concern for me isn't even on the ball. It's off the ball. If you watch Duke games, he's kind of floaty, is the word I would use. Not too dissimilar to how Andrew Wiggins was at times in Minnesota, but at least Wiggs was legit a good on-ball defender when he applied himself. Banchero is just okay on the ball, and off the ball, he kind of floats. I don't think you could play him between Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns because I think he'd get lost. I think he'd get lost in rotations. He's got to work on his communication defensively. So for me, the fit with the Wolves is defensively, it doesn't really work because it would be brutal defensively. On offense, I think he'd be a ball stopper. I think he's too high usage of a guy, would want to be high usage from day one. When Edwards is third year in the NBA is a more polished and powerful scorer, better shooter, all that stuff. And Cat's obviously a fantastic scorer from all three levels. So especially if D'Angelo Russell is still on the roster, where does Banchero fit in? He's not good enough catch and shoot. I still think the offensive upside is so great that if the Wolves were, again, the term I'm using, magically at number 3 in this draft, I think there's enough of a drop off between 3 and whoever you're going to take 4 among the wings and the guys who I actually think would be better roster fits for Minnesota. The exercise is if you had the 3rd pick. And I think it's a big mistake to then reach for somebody who's a roster fit at that point. I think you have to take best player available, with the tiebreaker being roster fit, right? You're not going to like reach necessarily for, there's the Shaedon Sharps and Jaden Ivey and Keegan Murray and all these guys that are likely going to go between like 4 and 8 or something like that. I think it'd be really tough to justify taking one of those guys, even if all of them that I just listed, Murray and Ivy and Sharp, those guys are better fits for the Wolves roster. I think the upside with Banchero is still too good to not take him if the Wolves were magically at 3. I just think Jabari Smith is by far the best fit for the Wolves, and I think the best prospect. Chet Holmgren is clearly number 2, although a distant 2. I think distance probably a fair word to use behind Smith. And then 3rd, I think it would have to be Banchero. But again, the upside is there. So if you're at 3 and you're the Timberwolves, you'd have to take him. Now, they're not at 3. They're not going to trade up to 3. If in any world Jabari Smith somehow slipped to 3, which isn't going to happen, I mean, I don't know, you throw everything at the Rockets at that point. I don't think they want D'Angelo Russell, but give them whatever they want to get to 3 to take Jabari Smith, because I think it is, I'll say it again, a dream fit for Minnesota if Jabari Smith were to magically end up on the Timberwolves. I think that would be phenomenal. All right. That's all we have for you today. We're going to continue the series on Friday, unless, of course, anything major breaks on the rumor front related to the Timberwolves, or, of course, any actual news. During the NBA Finals feels unlikely. But we're definitely going to talk more draft here moving forward. We're going to have some guests to talk draft, talk prospects, who the Wolves might take at 19. So as we inch closer through the big board, that will become more relevant. We're going to do all that here in the coming days and next couple of weeks. Thanks once again for listening to Locked On Wolves, and thank you for making us your first listen every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as Apple, Google, Spotify, and Odyssey. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken, with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. A reminder that now during draft season, to make Locked On NBA Big Board your second listen every day, host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and the author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock drafts, player rankings, and of course, Big Boards. It's free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.